Good afternoon, Adab, and welcome to this beautiful setting at Salimpur House for a rather extraordinary session at Ashikana, Lucknow. And welcome to the 15th edition of the Mahindra Sanatkada Lucknow Festival. Many of you are familiar faces, many of you are new, but welcome. This year, we dedicate our session, the Lucknow Lectern 2024, to our dear late friend, Professor Salim Kidwai, who is best remembered as a famed medieval historian, gay activist, author, and translator. He was born in Lucknow to a family of intellectuals and Sufi saints from Badgaon in Barabanki district. Deeply sensitive to the cultural, linguistic, and aesthetic nuances of Awadh and Lucknow, Salim taught history at Ramjas College, Delhi University until 1993, and his other academic areas of interest were Mughal politics and culture, the history of Tawaifs, and North Indian music. He was the backbone of Sanatkada. He pushed us, he pushed me to excel. Salim has been our mentor and most importantly, our conscience keeper. I'd now like to invite another very equally dear friend of Sanatkada, Anuja Mahindra Sharma, to flag off this session. She's currently based in Bangalore, having lived primarily in Bombay and traveled the world. She started her career with Mark Publications and now runs a successful coffee estate in Coog. With a deep-rooted desire to make a significant contribution to society, Anuja has been actively involved with an array of activities which reflect her interests ranging from spirituality and metaphysics to the performing arts, animal welfare, and environmental concerns. Please do join me in giving her a warm Sanatkada welcome.
Thank you for that introduction, Parveen. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to greet you all with a namaskar, adab, and a very good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us at what will be a truly good afternoon, due to the upcoming session, which is going to be both informative and interesting, thanks to Parmesh Shahani, who's going to be our speaker at this Lucknow Lectern today. Parmesh has broken the glass ceiling on gay conversations in the cosmopolitan city of Mumbai, and we are delighted to have him with us here at the Mahindra Sanatkada Lucknow Festival to elevate and enhance our understanding of the LGBTQIA+ inclusion. Parmesh currently heads the DEI, Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Lab at Godrej Industries in Mumbai. This is an experimental space that aims to empower inclusion ecosystems both within the Godrej Industries system as well as outside. Prior to this, between 2011 and 2021, he founded and headed the Godrej India Culture Lab as an interdisciplinary project which examined the ever-changing nature of Indian society. Parmesh's first book, Gay Bombay, Globalisation, Love, and Belonging in Contemporary India, was released in 2008. His second book, Queeristan LGBTQ Inclusion in the Indian Workplace, was released in 2020. It was conferred the CK Prahalad Prize for Best Business Book of 2021 and also awarded the Laadli Media Award for Gender Sensitivity that same year. Parmesh holds an MS degree in Comparative Media Studies from the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He is a TED Senior Fellow, a Yale World Fellow, a World Economic Forum Young Global Leader, and a board member of Godrej International Artists Association and Breakthrough. It's a privilege for us to be interacting with you today, Parmesh, and I invite all our audience to join me in welcoming you to this, our Salim Kidwai Lucknow Lectern.
And I've loved coming back to this festival as many times I have in the past, to be part of the food, the conversations, and the mindset as well, right? So in this talk, I actually want to answer a question that I get asked all the time right now. And wherever I go, I get this question: why are you so hopeful? Why are you so bubbly? Why are you so excited? Look at the world all around. How are you talking about all the colors of the rainbow when one color seems to be floating about all that? And I get these questions all the time right now. So, TK, so in this question, we're going to try and answer some of this. But before that, how amazing is this idea of Ashikana and Ashiki, right? So can we just clap for that? And I just want to go back to the festival note, and it's so beautiful. It says, some say Ashiki is synonymous with peace, and some say Junoon. But the beauty of Ashiki is, it lies in how many multiple layers of emotions leading to diverse interpretations and manifestations of it. Ashiki is not right and not wrong. It just is. And I think the same might be said of Queeristan. That's the title of my book. And so what I'm going to do over the next hour or however long I have with you is give you some glimpses of the past 10 years of working on this book project. To me, Queeristan is a hopeful world. It's a positive world. And it lives literally and flourishes all around us. And again, as I said, in the light of so many changes that have happened in the past, most recently queer marriage was denied. There is constant, the LGBTQI community is faced with constant violence all the time, physical, emotional, and otherwise. And thus, sitting here in Lucknow in the middle of this thing, a lot of what I might share with you might seem overtly optimistic and silly. But as an ashik, as someone who believes in the transcendental nature of queerness and love, and someone who is very, very, very invested in helping build a better tomorrow, I think my romance and hope with which I'm viewing this world are as important as cautiousness and cynicism. And as Sainath says, and he said this some years ago when he came and spoke at our lab at Godrej, he says, I live on this island of hope, somewhere between pessimism and optimism as well. So, my assertion number one, and my talk is framed as like some 5 assertions that I'm going to make, and that I'll then expand on. Okay? So, assertion number 1. In Queeristan, we learn from our queer elders and pass on our knowledge from generation to generation, like we do in so many other spaces. And the queer movement in our country is very much grateful to the fact that for years, so my generation of, say, writers and people who catalog change could only do our work because there were so many generations that came before us as well. So I'm personally very grateful that we're doing this as a Salim Kidwai Memorial lecture as well. Salim is just one of the many incredible mentors that I've had. There have been so many others. Here's Hoshang, for example, in Hyderabad recently. There's Maya Sharma. And that's actually from a time in Lucknow where Salim started coming and hanging out with me when I would recruit at IIM Lucknow. And Salim, as a queer elder, as a mentor, knew very much how to love, knew very much how to nurture, even when it's difficult. And our queer movement, is often in change, and there's often disagreements and conflicts within, as there are in so many other movements. But Salim knew very much on how to create this space for possibility, give space to the next generation, and really, really enable multiple ideas of queerness to flourish as well. And he loved that I was actually, through my vantage point in the corporate world, interjecting queerness into the business space. He really hated this idea of reduction. And I'm so glad that this belief of mine that other worlds are possible, but before we create them, we have to imagine them, and then, in a sense, actualize them, really was built on the back of, say, the scholarly work of Salim and so many other scholars, activists, and change makers of the generations before, right? If folks like Salim and others did not give us this legacy of, seeing the past in so many different ways, and Naman loved your lecture in the morning as well, where you look at at one particular text and you use it to reimagine or reframe the past in such an interesting and complex and not so linear way as well, right? And in the LGBTQ space, Salim, through his books, through his life, through his mentorship, was doing all of that, then how would we be able to imagine a different future as well, right? So, okay, Salim was also very funny, he was very gossipy, he made lots of sexual jokes all the time, which I loved. And I've tried very hard to bring this multi-dimensional, aspect of what it means to be queer in Queeristan as well. Especially the idea of queer joy, because so many narratives of queerness are about queer struggles, or the law, or health, and so on. But queer joy, what my friend Brian Horton, who's a professor at Brandeis, calls in his book Shimmers of the Fabulous, in which he's actually studying queer possibility, queer nightlife, and there are others like Kareem Khubchandani, Anjali Arondekar, and so many others who are now looking at queerness through the lens of radical joy, possibility, fabulosity. I've tried very much to take, that ethos and bring it into this book. So assertion number one of being grateful that there is a knowledge transfer in Queeristan between previous generation and ours. I'm going to stop it at that. And actually, what's interesting is that it's not just book projects, but all over India right now, there are incredible oral history archives that have either been created or are in the process of being created. Some of these are situated in activist spaces. Some of these are situated in law spaces, like Kamra, which is an archive, which is now at the National Law School. And it's very, very exciting. So I'm going to read out a bit from my book, which talks about experiencing Salim. I know you're all dying to ask questions, but hold them until later. Okay. So in Lucknow, having dinner with the queer icon historian Salim Kidwai. Salim does Avdi Tehzeeb from a different era. An elegant home, an Afghan hound lying down languorously at the entrance. Anant, I think we were together when this happened. A library full of old books. I half expected Ghulam Ali's Chupke Chupke Raat Din to start playing from a gramophone somewhere. But instead, Salim and I filled his study with the reverberating sounds of our cackly gossip. We had returned to his home after my session at IIM Lucknow with the first-year MBA batch of 400 students, where I had urged all of them to become champions for the LGBT community with my over-the-top gayness, all under the guise of recruitment for Godrej's HR department. This is what I call cultural acupuncture, where I enter the corporate world trying to help the corporate, but I'm actually like creating spaces for the queer community, which helps everyone, the community as well as that. It's called win-win scenarios, and we need more of those in our country at this moment. But I must say that at IIM Lucknow, they thought they were getting a business talk. They got 55 minutes of LGBTQ rights and 5 minutes of, by the way, you should join Godrej. But, good, no? Okay. Salim had beamed entirely through the session, nodding approvingly, and I had performed even more dramatically than I normally would have, knowing that one of my queer gurus was watching. As I savored every morsel of the fragrant shami kebabs, a Kidwai family recipe handed down over generations, and tried to lick every grain of biryani off my plate, I was reminded of another friend, the young academic Dhiren Borissa. While Salim had just retired from his teaching, Dhiren was just getting started as an assistant professor at OP Jindal University. When I first met Dhiren at our Godrej-sponsored Mingle conference in 2014, he was a PhD student at the Jawaharlal Nehru University at that time. And we had had a heated public discussion. I'm embarrassed to say that at that time, I had argued that queer people should subsume all their other identities and convince straight people that we are just like them. Furthermore, even within the movement, I had said that queer people need to rally around Section 377 and think of other inequalities later. I cringe when I think of myself at that time, and I'm sure 20 years later I'll cringe when I think of myself now also, but then that's growth, I suppose, or old age. But Dhiren was kind enough to forgive me for my foolishness. And over the years, we became friends, and we have bonded over many other things, including our love for bow ties. Dhiren recently came to our culture lab to speak about caste and queerness, the subject matter of his PhD dissertation. The video team, if you can cue video number 1. At his event, he called his intersectional despair a khichdi. When I looked at my plate of biryani in Salim's house that day, Dhiren's voice spoke back to me.
There's often a silence around when you talk about caste within queer spaces. I would rather add there's also hostility when you talk about caste in queer spaces, regardless of the fact that caste is everywhere. And the virtue of the fact that a lot of people are sitting here on that side, or a bunch of us are sitting on this side who cover particular backgrounds, is itself a manifestation of caste, of whom you desire, who gets to desire, whose desirability counts, is also manifestation of caste. Or where do you come from is manifestation of caste. So when you talk about what is Dalit queer, there's often a mistaken entity that often you look at them as some additive constructs that you can add Dalitness to queerness, and there's something else, some khichdi will come out, and that khichdi is very tasty or very not tasty, or people want to puke after it. Queer movements across this country, a lot of them do not like that khichdi and they hate it. But it's more of trying to tell that how, whatever we are, in whatever manifestations that we are, even in terms of my desire, whom do I like, whom do I want to sleep with, or what backgrounds, what bastis, what localities, what languages I can speak, what education I could get, what education I could not get, or what do I do, or how I'm treated differently by different people at different levels. It's all constitutive each other. It's not two separate things that come together. But it's that my queerness is defined by my caste is defined by my queerness, because neither in the anti-caste spaces I will be fully accepted, neither in queer spaces will be fully accepted. And thus, to just see it as something, so for me then, Dalit queer would mean that continuously at the threshold, trying to challenge oneself, challenge the boundaries, because you're continuously at that you can't, like khaya nahi banta, like nigle nahi banta, or nikalte bhi nahi banta. And so therefore, for me, Dalit queerness is then, it's continuous struggle to recognize what you are, acknowledging self and the complexities and the histories that we come with, and not just as Dalit queer people, but everybody, right? With all kinds of baggages of privileges, baggages of untouchable histories, baggages which have denied us a lot of things, to also queerness, because to me, I often see queerness as aspirational category. I see queerness as something that can actually open up possibilities of change, and remarkable change, and change which takes you far away from hostilities that you have suffered in your life, right? But I've also seen within queer spaces a lot of hostilities being reproduced, exemplified. So therefore my Dalit queerness is this threshold which is always slippery, which is always soapy, it's always messy, right? So therefore, I can't give you a neat definition, because there's no neat definition. And there's no neat amalgamation of these two entities possible. Because to each one of us, it manifests in different forms. Given the range of possibilities, privileges, burdens that we are continuously carrying and negotiating the world with.
So from a queer elder to so someone who is defining the queer future as Dhiren does, and what Dhiren calls in this small excerpt of queerness as an aspirational category that can take you away from hostilities. Amongst other things, that's what I also find very exciting in this video and in this talk. And that brings me to my assertion, or point number 2, if we can have the slides, that in Queeristan, the young queers, future queer leaders are creating actually incredibly new, complex, and exciting intersectional narratives of what it means to be queer. So Dhiren and Aro, who were on that panel, are part of a group called the Dalit Queer Project, and there are so many others. Yeah, thanks. And there are so many others right now working in incredible spaces. There's the Queer Muslim Project, which is online, but also has increasingly over the years started spreading itself into various offline spaces. There's work happening all across the country. There's Hukia in Assam. There are groups like Yaol in Manipur, which I'm super excited about, where Saddam has expanded the idea of what a community space should be like, both in size and scale. So from having an all-trans football team, for example, to national queer games, to a drop-in center for mental health counseling, to skilling. I mean, it's really taking what queerness can be and the multiple dimensions of it into very, very exciting directions, right? In Hyderabad, where actually now tomorrow, or maybe today, I think, is where the Queer Swabhiman Yatra is taking place. The idea that the fact that it's called Queer Swabhiman Yatra and not Pride is interesting, because there the queer struggle over the past few years was deeply rooted in the Telangana movement. So it came out of a struggle for two various different kinds of independence kind of coexisting and feeding off each other. And even now, if you look at the exciting work that's coming out of Hyderabad, for example, queerness is very much intersecting with the anti-caste movement and others. And this QT center, which is being built there, has it's a safe space, it offers counseling and everything, but also an incredible Ambedkarite library in which, say, books, ideas, conversations around being queer, as well as, say, being from other various underrepresented or oppressed communities come to the fore over there. In other spaces, there are groups like Tweet and Periphery, which are, imagining queerness as a physical thing and are building homes all over the country for trans people. There are entrepreneurs like Zainab, who's a friend who's created many things, including a trans cafe and now a trans beauty salon. And Zainab is just one of multiple queer entrepreneurs across this country as well. Grace, who you saw sitting to the left of Dhiren in that video, is India's first Dalit trans engineer who's done a bunch of incredible projects, one of which I really like as a future public-private partnership, almost template. Whereas the government of that particular region, that they've called Sandeep Nagar, gave them the land. Grace and another bunch of trans activists said, we will provide the labor. Someone else gave cows and so on. And they've set up an all-transgender dairy cooperative in which milk and other products are then sold for commercial purposes as well. So really thinking of how can the state and private sectors and communities collaborate to create these win-win scenarios for tomorrow, which we need, right? And there are so many others. If you look at Revival Disability Project, it's looking at the intersection of disability and queerness. So many other projects are looking at neurodiversity and queerness. So that's my assertion number 2, that, looking at or taking or feeling very grateful of the inputs that we have from our queer elders in Queeristan today. The young queer generations of today and tomorrow are really, really taking queerness into exciting new directions, and I'm so happy about that. Okay, assertion number 3. So Queeristan, for all of you are wondering, is my reimagination of India as a queer-friendly, inclusive, intersectional haven in which everyone lives happily and harmoniously, and we all create win-win scenarios. And the whole point of this talk, for all of those who came in late, is that we are already living in the beginnings of Queeristan, and I'm trying to kind of give you various dimensions of it as well. I can see a few raised eyebrows. I'm excited about those because that means there's going to be questions. Great. So, assertion number 3, in Queeristan, families are changing, and this reimagination is being made visible in multiple ways, right? So there's various kinds. So I actually firmly believe that the axis on which a lot of societal change is going to come about is this axis of family. How do we include people in our own families? How do we widen the idea of family beyond? We had a Supreme Court judgment in which family was thought of in very particular ways, but that is not what is happening in real life. In real life, families are being expanded and reimagined in multiple creative ways as well. And we want to reach a point where, say, our courts and other people recognize the changes that are already happening all around, right? For example, blood families, so parents accepting is now very I'm sure, there's many parents who don't accept also, but parents accepting is not such a big deal. What's exciting now is children accepting their queer parents, which is also happening in a very exciting way. So parents are, of course, accepting. Children are also accepting their queer parents. There are I know many queer couples living with their children in various ways all over this country. In which ways? Now, how the children came, is it legal? Is it not legal? Have they been adopted? These are all different things, but the point is that there are families more and more across this country in which queer people are raising children together in very, very interesting ways. There are new kinds of families I'm seeing, and all of these are not fabrication. So I've just 2 families that I'll just tell you that I know very well. One of them in Delhi, which is very interesting. It's a friend of mine who's lesbian. She started dating someone else, but that someone else had already bought a house with her partner, but then they broke up, and then they said, we are not together anymore, but we have this house, so let's live together. And they also had a dog, so they didn't want to break up because they both loved the house and the dog. So this friend of mine moved in with her partner and her partner's ex and their dog. And they live very, very happily together as part of this queer ecosystem. It is also a family. It is also living in today's India, and they're kind of happy. Right? Another person I know, again, who's a friend. When I met them, they thought that they were, when I met them, they were married to a woman. At some point, they began to think that they were a gay man. At some point, they realized that they were actually a trans woman. So they had an honest conversation with their wife. Their wife said, I love you, but I don't know if I will love you if and when you transition. So they had this conversation, and they decided that they wanted to have a child together. So they had a child together, and then the wife said, okay, if you want to transition, transition. So they transitioned. Now they are a woman, and they share custody of their daughter together with each other. But it's like two mothers sharing custody of a daughter. After transitioning, my friend, she realized that when she thought she was a gay man, or when she imagined she was a gay man, she was attracted to other men. But post-transition, she realized that she is actually attracted to other women. So she started dating someone, and then now that person moved in. So it's a very interesting home of someone living with their partner, their ex-wife, and their child. So it's a home in which there are three mothers and a daughter, and they are living very happily together. The child goes to school. Everyone in the school knows this child has three mothers, and it's actually a very interesting ecosystem. This is also happening. I mean, that's my point. This is also happening in our beautiful Queeristan as well, which we need to acknowledge, which I think we need to make space for, and we need to widen our horizons in terms of understanding and imagining as well, right? So, I mean, it's all happening. So I think at some point, in a larger way, we'll have to reimagine this notion of family. Certainly, I'm excited by some attempts being made in our media, because media is so powerful as well. So again, what's exciting is, of course, now there's so many celebs who are playing queer people as well, whether it's Arvind Swamy. Anyone else has had a big crush on Arvind Swamy forever? If you've not seen, ayo, God, like post-Roja, the only good thing that Arvind Swamy has done is Dear Dad. Please go watch Dear Dad. It's about a father trying to tell his child that he is gay. And it's like reverses this whole coming out story. It's like, will my child accept me? Will my child accept me? It's very, very good fun. And like Arvind Swamy, cute as ever. But everyone now is playing queer characters. No, Mammootty is playing queer characters. Ayushmann is playing queer characters everywhere. Sushmita is also playing queer characters. So besides all of this, what's interesting is finally even queer people now are playing queer people ourselves. So whether it's Rani Kohinoor, and thank you for coming. I don't know if you all saw it, but the only good thing about that movie was like Rani Kohinoor, Sushant, and that whole Kitty Sue scene. The rest of the movie was very boring, but go see it. I mean, poor Bhumi, yeah. She's like bad roles. I mean, good actor, but like what films Bhumi gets. And like finally, you know, Trinetra, there are actors like Trinetra who are playing queer characters in Made in Heaven and so on. My whole point is that we are seeing in public, in the media we consume, we're seeing so much more queerness in various ways. Is it showing the rich? Are these family stories showcasing the rich range of families that we see all around us in life? No. But are they like genuine, honest attempts at like widening the conversation? Yeah. And I find that very, very exciting. Team, if you can cue video number 2. What I really like is also how so many ads are featuring queer people and all. And this is very exciting. Queer people, queer products. Let's just see this video. This is a video that I really like. It's a jewelry ad. And we'll talk about it later. much. Well, it's fun. We can clap if we like things. I don't feel shy. I thought love. Very nice. Now, obviously, we're living in, this is neoliberal capitalism, so even support and all should be buy my jewels. But, capitalism is everywhere, no? So it's okay. I mean, it's really nice that brands, companies, etc., are including narratives that incidentally is a trans person playing a trans person, which in our media is it's a new thing right now, because until then, other people were playing queer people. So I think it's really, really interesting that so much of the communication around queerness is also around this idea of, families. And what I love at this moment, could things be better? Of course. Could there be more nuance and complexity? Hell yeah. What I'm actually happy about is the fact that finally we are going beyond acceptance narrative. Now it's celebration narrative. It's not that I accept my queer child. I celebrate my queer family member, and I want to take part in their joy and include myself in all of that. And I think that's, I find super, super exciting as well. And this is, of course, besides the multitude of books. So recently at the Rainbow Lit Fest in Delhi, I think 2 months ago or last month, I was so happy because I kind of looked at all the books that were there, and there were so many. There's I think more than 200 books now that describe what it means to be queer and Indian. And not just, coming out stories. There's queer fantasy. There's a book called Zorian Cross, which I love, which is about, it's a queer person with superpowers. It's like a queer Harry Potter with aunts who are into witchcraft, and they're all living in Delhi, in South Delhi. It's very, very exciting. Or there's memoirs, it has, there's called School, Enid Blyton kind of queer stories, It Has No Name by Payal Dhar. Again, highly recommended, great fun. Or memoirs like Homeless by Vaishali, which is a memoir of growing up queer, growing up lesbian and dyslexic in a Hyderabad university, and everything that happens in that space as well. And of course, memoirs by trans icons like Revati Akai. There's so much writing around this range of queer experiences that I find very, very exciting as well. Okay, assertion number 4. In Queeristan, our schools and colleges are safe spaces. They are, some of them, but it's interesting to let's look at some of these, and hopefully these can be an exemplar for others to follow, to emulate, and to go on this journey of inclusion as well, right? So I'm going to actually read out again the first para of the new preface to Queeristan. Now, this book has done really, really well. Hashtag humble brag. But, so each time a new edition comes out, I have to write a new forward. So this is of the latest forward, and who knows, when we come here next, there might be edition 8 or 9 or whatever. But yeah, okay, good. I mean, look at our world, yeah. Modesty is last season. So, okay. This is from the preface to the latest edition. I have a bird's eye view from my perch in the auditorium at the Jamnabai Nursery School in Mumbai on a wet monsoon morning in July 2022. It has been half an hour since the principal and school alums ceremoniously welcomed me alongside other queer activists, and we jointly lit an enormous brass diya at the entrance of the school. Now, here we are on this humongous stage, facing a sea of around 300 students with smiling faces and shiny eyes, and talking about LGBTQIA+ inclusion and how schools can become more empowering spaces for queer individuals. The students had sent us their questions anonymously using chits, but many of them also reached for the mic and posed further questions directly to us on the panel. Nothing is off limits, from gender-inclusive uniforms to pronouns that the students and teachers can use in class. Towards the end, a senior school trustee stands up, takes the mic, and commits that the school will invest not just in student well-being, but also in hiring trans employees as support staff. The audience, including parents, alums, and teachers, burst into excited applause. He then turns towards me and asks for a copy of Queeristan so he can learn some more and do more. I mean, yeah. I don't know if that happened or not, but I put it in the beginning of the book, because why not? Someone pinch me. Am I dreaming? No, this is as real as the torrential rain outside. And I'm just going to read this bit because it'll give you a sense of how the book is written. It's a business book, but I often squeeze in bits like this just for fun. And soon it's time for us to break and have the best vada pav in the city. I know vada pav favoritism is a sensitive topic in Mumbai, but trust me, those from Shivaji's Vada Pav stall outside Mithi Bai College nearby, were really good and IMHO, in my humble opinion, even better than my previous favorite from Ashok's next to Kirti College. Keh diya na, bas. That's Jaya Bachchan and K3G. From Foucault to Derrida to Jaya Bachchan to Rakhi Sawant. Keh diya na, bas. At the end, Jaya says, na, keh diya bas. When she doesn't do his tie. Jaya is the other queer icon. I start with Hema Malini, but like I think I should do some thinking about Jaya Bachchan as a queer icon, because everyone ignores her. Acha, so it's not just this school, right? I mean, it's quite incredible that, you know, it's schools like this. There are so many others. There's Tagore International in Delhi. There are so many other schools all over. Come and sit in front. There's like fun. Come and sit here. Come sit here. There's lots of places. There are so many schools. There are so many colleges like this which have gender-neutral hostels. There are so many engineering colleges, business schools, and others which are all have LGBTQ associations right now, right? There are courses being held. In Maharashtra, there's Shankar Rao Chavan Law College. At Ashoka, of course, there are courses on gender and sexuality and centers, but also so many others. So I think it's very interesting that when we can, and of course there are some states and which are allowed in their state-level textbooks like Bal Bharati, etc., to talk about gender and families of various kinds. It's easier in some states than in others. But the point is, our schools and colleges, at least some of them, are being reimagined in a way that it wasn't, say, for people in my generation and so on. And it's quite exciting. It's quite interesting. And I think it's a useful kind of bulwark to say some of the other stuff which is happening as well. Okay, point number 5. This is interesting, and this we can talk about. My assertion is that in Queeristan, the governments honor and incentivize queer people and our initiatives as well. Now, it might seem, again, it might seem really, like what are we talking about, and hard to imagine, but you know, it is happening in bits and pieces. We have to kind of know where to look and where to seek our inspiration from. So, you know, I think yesterday itself, the Maharashtra government honored Gauri Sawant, who is a huge LGBTQ icon, with the Maharashtra Samman Puraskar. We've had, in the recent past, 2 celebrated trans people receiving Padma Shris. This is Narthaki Natraj in 2019 and Manjama Jogati in 2021. That's Manjama on the left. We've had so many other queer people who are out and proud as queer people, who are interacting with various governments, either formally or officially, or receiving awards and being part of the conversation. Duti Chand is just one who comes to mind, but there are so many others as well. And I think there's a difference between, say, the national government and various state governments as well. So at the state level, actually, there's very interesting work. Kerala has always been inquisitive and been proactive in furthering the rights of queer people. For example, some years ago, in 2022, when Adam Harry, who's a Kerala-based trans man, and he was initially denied a license to fly by the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, got a lot of help from his state government, and it actually forced the Director General of Civil Aviation to come out with new guidelines, and Adam Harry actually got the license to fly and so on. Adam Harry instantly got a state scholarship also to become a pilot from the Kerala state government, right? Tamil Nadu is doing very interesting work, whether it's in rights, whether it's in hiring transgender nurses in hospitals, whether it is in trans hostels for trans students to not feel uncomfortable. Tamil Nadu is actually quite interesting, and that's why there is this one image here. That on the left is Stalin, the Honorable Chief Minister, and that's my boss, Nisa Godrej in the blue jacket. And this is from 2 months ago, where we actually launched, where we did an MOU, and Godrej Consumer Products, one of the Godrej companies, is investing 500 crores in a new manufacturing facility near Chennai. And what's interesting is that we spoke to the Honorable Chief Minister and his team, and they said that if you can have 50% of your workforce as women and 5% PWD and LGBTQ, we will collaborate with you and we will give you various incentives to do this as well, because it's a win-win scenario. They said, we want to hire more, we want more women, more LGBTQ people, more PWD people working, and you want it too, so let's incentivize this in an interesting way. So it's very, very exciting. So we said yes, and now we're in the exciting phase of actually building out this facility and actually like seeking talent and so on. So I think you're going to see more and more states understand that inclusion is beneficial for everyone, including LGBTQ inclusion. And you're going to see more and more of this. It's already happening in other parts. States are already competing in various ways for other things. I think they are going to compete for talent, and being inclusive to various groups, including LGBTQ, I think is going to become an interesting differentiator as well. But even besides, say, the commerce or the economics, there's some very incredible states. Like in Chhattisgarh, for example, the former Chief Minister, Bhupesh Baghel, actually helped organize Raipur Pride. He attended mass transgender weddings and was a big ally at an individual level. There have been politicians over the years, whether it's Shashi Tharoor, whether it's Dr. Shashi Tharoor, whether it's Deve Gowda, whether it's Kani Mozi, whether it's Milan Deora, who has now switched alliances and so on. And there have been so many political parties like the AIADMK, which actually has Apsara Reddy, who is a celebrated transgender activist, as their official spokesperson. And in Maharashtra, Disha Pinky Sheikh from the Vanchit Bahujan Aghadi, which is Dr. Prakash Ambedkar's party as well. So, we are seeing queerness interject into the political space in various interesting ways. We are seeing various governments acknowledge and recognize. Could there be more? Of course. But is this an interesting moment in which we all have to think creatively about how these interventions are going to work and play out? Yes. So in most things, I feel like the glass is half full, half empty. Here I'm thinking maybe 1/4 full, 3/4 empty, but there is something in the glass, which is what is exciting me at this point. Okay, finally, my assertion number 6, and this is what I do in the workplace as well, is I think that what's really, at this point, for queerness to become, to step up and manifest itself more and more in public spaces, I think workplaces are doing a lot of very, very interesting work. And this is what my work has been over the past 20 years or so. How do we get workplace to understand? I've used 3 strategies in my book. One is called, the one that I've called cultural acupuncture, borrowing from the Harry Potter Alliance's use of the term, where I say that data means a lot, but organizations change because of culture and emotion, and where you interject that culture and how you expand it is going to make your organization more inclusive or not. The other is I've really framed workplace inclusion in loco parentis, where I talk to various companies and say that, you are in charge. I think in India, more than other parts of the world, we in our organizations have to think of our employees as our children, and we have to really think of them, because a lot of people a lot of us in things like LGBTQ and so many other things, we might not have had the best parenting growing up. So our workplaces have to step up and act almost in loco parentis to everyone else and say, we can be your safe space, we can be the space where you can articulate, assert, and celebrate yourself, and we can provide you all the facilities that you need to flourish. In an ideal world, all of this would be happening at home, but because it doesn't happen at home, my argument is that our workplaces have to step up and do more, and so many are. And the third is, framing resistance in what I've called jugaad resistance, saying that, you don't have to wait for a court to change the laws, or you don't have to wait for the activist NGO in your city to make about change. Use your position wherever you are located to bring about change. So if you are an intern, ask questions and bring about change. If you're organizing a conference, maybe you can do something. If you are in charge of hiring, maybe you can say, can we hire from here instead of there? If we can just think about change in the workplace, a series of small things, what I call micro-revolutions rather than a macro-revolution, then we will, at least within workplaces as well, bring about this Queeristan as well. And I think it's actually very exciting if you see over the past 10 years how many organizations have progressed, whether it's in having policies that protect their employees, whether it's in offering benefits to their queer employees for their partners and for their families, whether it is offering things like, say if you're trans, gender affirmation surgeries, hormones, and so on, whether it is in facilities like washrooms and more. And it's actually quite interesting that a lot of the change that is happening, say with LGBTQ, is also happening in workplaces as well. And again, one can say that this is marginal. Formal organized workplaces are a small percentage. A lot of India is informal. A lot of companies are small and medium enterprise, and they may not have all of this. But I think that's reductionist, because the truth is small and medium companies or like informal are also very much part of the ethos. Everyone is saying Tali and Badhai Do for example, at home, and everyone is part of this larger ethos. So in the past few years since the book has come out, of course I've had conversations or very good talks at CII and FICCI, but there have been also amazing conversations with All India Management Association, or FICCI Flow, and so many of these other organizations which might be smaller, and in which their participants might not be in Bombay, Delhi, but might be in Tirupur or in somewhere else, for example. But there's also very good work, and there's exciting work happening over there also as well. And the biggest employer is, of course, the government. And a lot of the thinking now is, how can the public sector be a force for good in this space as well? But all of this thinking and all is happening as well, right? So I want to have actually a Q&A session. So I'm going to... Actually, I think this binary we make between, say, the factory and the office, or between urban and rural, is more in our head than in practice. So I've found more acceptance, and I spend now a lot of time in factory settings as well, talking about gender, talking about LGBTQ, talking about PWD. And I found actually more accepting people in what is called blue collar versus white collar. Some of the most bigoted people I've met have like Harvard MBAs, and some of the most enlightened people might be third or fourth standard pass, if at all, and not speak English. So I think that binary we have to break in our head and say, people are people, and I think the same works in an office and in a factory. So I use family, I use the idea of family very strongly. It works in offices, it works in factories. I talk about the idea of family and how family is a space for inclusion and not exclusion. When it's an abstract concept, it's very different. But when we talk, I say, आपकी बेटी है, अगर आपकी बेटी आपको ये, क्या आप ऐसे माँ बाप बनना चाहते हो कि आपके बच्चे आपसे शेयर करें, कि आप ऐसे माँ बाप बनना चाहते हो कि आपके बच्चे आपसे डरें और नहीं शेयर करें? When we talk about love, when we talk about parenting, when we talk about that, I see no difference between, say, an office setting and a factory setting as well. Is the mahal different in the regions in which factories exist in? Yeah, the socio-cultural situation is different. But when I have found that when you talk one-on-one, I don't see that as a more discriminatory space. In general, I don't think India, whether rural, urban, factory, office, is a homophobic environment per se. I think there's deep ignorance about so many things, but homophobia, which is this deep aversion, is I don't see it happening. I see deep ignorance, I see lack of knowledge, I see like people say we don't know queer people in an area, and then I'm like, really? And then, then they start thinking, they're like, oh, maybe, and so on and so forth. I see that. I see spaces not being created where people can have these conversations. But once the conversations begin, I don't see a difference between here and there. There's also lived reality. I mean, if you're a trans person living in a Mumbai informal settlement or slum, your life might be more comfortable than a trans person trying to find a job, trying to find a flat in a housing society. It's just, I think it's, yeah. So I think what I've understood is that there are certain levers that I use. One is very clearly family. I talk very much about family. Second, I talk very much about this inclusive, syncretic tradition of the subcontinent. I say this, we have always been inclusive. And, when I talk to people, and it's, we have to blame the British for many things, that is certainly one of them. And we talk about the cleave when the British criminalized, say, tribes, or when they criminalized same-sex relationships and so on. It is very much a cleave. And then, of course, there's a generation of educated Indians who came after that, who were following, say, who absorbed British homophobic tendencies and practices and so on. But, so I talk very much about how inclusion is very much part of our rich and varied cultural heritages. I talk very much about how in families we have to be inclusive spaces, and then I talk about workplace values and what do we stand for, do we want to be that? And that I have realized, again, when you bring it to that, whether it's schools, whether it's colleges, whether it's workplaces, once you talk about the basics, I'm like, do you want to be a school in which people don't want to talk about who they are? Do you want to be? Of course, everyone wants to be that safe. So I try and elevate people to like the best version of themselves. And so far, that has tended to work.
Thank you.
Yeah,
It's very
yeah,
helpful.
yeah. Huh.
I saw the example of the government. And also when they felicitate, somebody from the spectrum, it's always or mostly trans. I don't think, they celebrated or felicitated Like a gay
Well,
rights-
Duty Chand is identifies as lesbian.
Okay.
Yeah. But more trans and more trans
so
women.
Why is that? Why do governments behave like that? You know, they're more comfortable with trans, but they're not too. But
I
then
think-
Yeah, because Duty,
yeah.
I think, has that identity of a sports person with international, fame and achievement for the country. So I think maybe that exception was made for her. But like, why is it that the governments are more trans-friendly as opposed to not recognizing? Yeah.
I think people understand trans more than they understand gay or lesbian in at least because I mean culturally, traditionally, trans people and trans women in particular have been more visible. So people understand a lot of the efforts as well in terms of government infrastructure, facilities. I mean, there's actually the PMJ Yojana, which gives health benefits to trans people from a couple of years ago. So a lot of the government efforts have been in that because, so two things. A is I think it's easier for state and national governments to understand trans. And second, I think in terms of collective organization, arguing and petitioning and receiving some of these, I think trans communities in our country are way more organized than say the LGBTI or A communities as well. So I think it's both. I think it's both. But I use that as an entry point into talking about other things. I think that's a good, if they are doing this, let's put our foot in that door and open it a little more, is the way I think about these things. Yeah.
Hello, really good presentation, really loved it. But I was wondering, like, do you think all these conversations are also happening at a very grassroots, rural, poor level, or does it always sort of span over a more elite English-speaking sort of crowd? Because the examples that you also gave of the school that you mentioned, and also the two mothers having like a kid, so I'm guessing they also kind of have access to some sort of like social capital that's letting them kind of have their kid go to a school and be recognized as like lesbian couple.
No, so yes and no. So my answer is no. They're happening everywhere. If I had more time, I'd read excerpts from Maya Sharma's incredible books, which talk about how, and Maya Sharma works in rural Gujarat. And her new book, Footprints of a Revolution, is amazing, because her first book is very much about her journey as an activist, and the second book is talking about the range of queer possibilities that Maya is encountering in her work. And we see queer mothers living together with a child as much in rural India as we would see here. The framing might be different. It might be two good friends living together. It might be ye apne sakhi ke saath or saheli ke saath, or, as that, they wouldn't. And actually there's an interesting moment where Maya is interviewing, and I don't know, I don't remember if it's the first or the second, maybe it's in Footprints, where Maya tells her, but, so you're lesbian. And she's vehemently, she doesn't want to use this word, because even using that word can change the situation for her in her own mind and then in the surroundings. So she prefers to have the ambiguity of good friend, and everything is happening. They're living together in the house, they're loving together, everything is, but they're not using those frameworks as well. So so one is that. What was your first question? I forgot.
So that only, like, do you think it's just like
No,
sort of limited within the
so
English-speaking?
So if you have like 2-3 minutes, indulge me in a story. Some of you might have heard it. I think you have told already. So I'm on the board of an organization called Breakthrough, which amongst other things works to prevent gender-based violence in various states in India and so on. And recently we were in a little village in Furlak, which is near Karnal in Haryana. And we were doing, it was a very interesting, because there's a, Breakthrough has people who go, and it's a program called Taron Ki Toli, where, you're trying to talk about ambition, development, aspiration with, say, high school students, and then through that you're bringing in issues of gender equality, and you should treat everyone equally, and are you doing are you doing as much housework with boys as your sister, and so on. So it's a after school kind of program in which you're interjecting, what good gender norms are, but in the guise of, say, aspiration, progress, and so on, because that's an inroad into working with many communities. So they've done a very interesting play in which one of it was one daughter, there was two fathers, one father's daughter wanted to become a police person, and the father said yes, and the other father's daughter wanted to become a lawyer, and the father said no. So it was a very interesting skit about I'm just telling this as an aside. My story is coming later, but it's a good story. It was an interesting skit in which how the children and the breakthrough volunteers, the way they framed it, because they said it's a village, all the cups were sitting there, all the women were in Ghungat, so it's a conservative village in which you are trying to bring about certain kinds of change as well. So the way the children had created the play to frame it was not that elders are bad or mean or want us to. They don't how to change the framework. So the father who was not allowing his daughter to become a lawyer, it wasn't that he was patriarchal or misogynistic, any of that. He said, so when the father who's allowing his daughter to become policeman said, why you're not allowing? I'm to allowing mine. He said, I don't mind if she becomes a lawyer, but the thing is, to go to college, she has to go to the bus stop, and the bus stop is, on the way to the bus stop is this daru ka thela. So then the other father said, so that is easy, why don't we talk to all the punches and change the location of the thela? Then both our daughters can go to college together in the same bus. So you present it as a solution. Anyways, this is to give you the context of what happened afterwards. And what happened afterwards, so I was chilling and chatting with these lovely high school students, and I'm thinking, I'm from Bombay, and I'm thinking so I was talking to them, and I was like, आप gender को binary, because I said breakthrough का जो काम हो रहा है यहाँ पे, आप gender के बारे में binary सोचते हैं कि आप spectrum के बारे में सोच रहे हैं. Then I was like, binary का stupid me, and they're like, we know what binary is, and we know what this is, and they totally schooled me in incredible ways, which was amazing, right? Because and then one person put their hand up and said, मेरा नाम पंकज है, लेकिन मैं और मेरे दोस्त मुझे पिंकी बुलाते हैं. And all the friends went and surrounded Pinky and said, Pinky हमारी दोस्त है. And they had such a nuanced understanding of gender, sexuality, being non-binary, what love, friendship, support, solidarity looks like. And so I was like, then I said, Pinky, आपके मम्मी पापा को पता है? They said, नहीं. So I said, they said, हम बताएंगे जब भी टाइम रेडी होगा, whatever. And all the friends said, और अगर वो नहीं मानेंगे, हम पिंकी के साथ हैं. So it's very interesting. So I think some of this, again, it's going back to what you were talking. I think we need more time in various fields. But I think in today's world, it's what Rahul Mehrotra and Matthias Econo have called circulatory urbanism, which I've kind of drawn from to call circulatory queerness in this book. I think ideas of gender and queerness circulate between, it is not rural versus urban or old versus young or this. I think it is because of media, mediation, cell phones, so many other things. I think these ideas are now circulatory. So cities learn as much from villages. In fact, cities are spatially organized like villages in the same way as villages learn from cities, and so on and so forth. So I think ideas flow now in very interesting circular patterns. So making these binary distinctions is just like basic and last season. Huh.
Do we have any more questions?
Sorry, are we allowed two?
Yes. There are three.
No, so I was actually sitting around with family one day, and my nephew started talking about gender, and he's 9 years old. And he said, he started sort of repeating something that he heard in class. He said, am I a man? Am I a woman? Am I a different sort of gender? Or do I prefer not to say? And then he says, I'm a croissant. So, what is the right age to start talking about it, in that family ecosystem, without sort of doing too much shock and awe with the little child who's growing up, around a queer family and all of that. So I don't know if there's some sense that you've learned over the years about what's the right way to do it. Or, I mean, there is no one right way, but how do you approach this?
I think with kids come with very innate liberal, progressive attitudes. I think what we have to do as parents, elders is try and not harm them as much as we can. So I think the right age is whenever, just don't put these outdated notions in the head as early as you can. And I've had so many friends who have kids who've grown up knowing, say, queer people, for example. I had a friend who had a daughter, and she's seen, her parents have some of her parents' friends are husband, wife, and she's seen me and my partner go. And she's like, Parmesh uncle and his partner come all the time. So in her mind, it's very, and I remember once when she was 4 or 5, and we were talking about fairy tales, and she was talking about Rapunzel, which I don't like very much because like who is this silly, lowering your hair, waiting for some man to climb up your hair. So I was telling her, I was like, listen, Anara, this is like what nonsense, what a stupid story. And then she was like, what should we do? I said, let's rewrite it. I said, first, though, she has to chop her hair off. Who can maintain all these long hair? That is one thing. I said, second, why does she have to wait for a man? So we rewrote the story and we said Rapunzel has a girlfriend and they're in a good relationship, and if someone tries to attack her, she does karate and like defeats them. So we reimagined Rapunzel, and then of course it was very, so I mean this child has grown up like that very, in a very matter-of-fact way. So I think the age to talk to your children about equality and inclusion is any age, the same age as you would talk about so many other things. But more than what you say, it's how you behave, right? I mean, children absorb your behavior more. So if some queer thing is coming on TV and you change it and say, they look at that more than what you are saying is right and whatever. I mean, so I think with kids, how you show your inclusion through everyday actions is as important as what you tell them. And there are progressive parents, progressive schools and colleges across our country who are on a daily basis demonstrating what inclusion looks like. As there are others who are doing performative and, around Pride Month, suddenly people wake up. But we know who those are. Yeah.
Let's be a little more inclusive towards long-haired chandas also.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah.
Well, I also wanted your thoughts on another thing. I'm also from a rural village called Arag. I'm the first generation graduate of the village, and last month we had the first intercaste marriage in the history of the village and everything. But at the same time, being a queer person, I also have a radar, right? So at the village, I can see a lot of individuals who are also in pretty unhappy marriages. One of them being my uncles, one of them, working for us, and a lot of others inside my cousin community. I think that the problem there, coming from the same background, is the lack of visibility, even for queer individuals to understand what queerness is. For me, I got lucky by shifting into a urban setting, as you mentioned, elder queers, giving it down to generation of younger queers. I have Ashish Chopra in Bangalore, Mayank and Saugata Basu, all of them are really good friends. But I think that one of the doors that corporate world can open is that, we see a lot of corporates organizing queer events for white-collar employees, but you don't see a lot of these corporates organizing these events for blue-collar employees, the non-English speaking employees as well, who can also take these conversations back home, either if they are living in the same city in the slums or if they're going back to their villages, they can also take these conversations. I mean, my village, I think the village god is Yellama, which is also a very queer god. We have Jogapas and Jogatis, and despite my village being so queer by religion, we do not really have a lot of queer representation, and I have to be really sad for my uncles and my cousins who have to bear the burden of a heterosexual marriage. But at the same time, do you think that opening up these events, and I see a lot of these events happening in Bangalore, I mean, I can see pride flags in co-working spaces, that is just such a huge relief to see. But do you think that organizing these events for the blue-collar employees also may be opening doors to a lot of visibility in the rural parts?
I think that's excellent. I think that's excellent. B, it is already happening from, from the location. Just for example, now, after a couple of weeks, we'll be doing something in Malanpur, which is in an hour away from Gwalior, where we have one of our Godrej consumer factories. It's very interesting. We had, as part of the DEI lab, we've been brainstorming, and one of the ideas of bringing families in. So we were doing a family day where every woman employee who will be there at the plant will be felicitated with the families over lunch, etc. And it's so interesting. We were all planning it as a, we've called it Godrej Ki Shakti, and of course building off Nari Shakti and all in this last budget and so on, Republic Day and so on. We were really, the demand came from the factory workers saying that if we are doing all of this with families, why only talk about women power and gender Shakti? Can you talk about the other dimensions that we are also doing? So it's very interesting that it is happening, it is being articulated more and more, and I think that is truly where that next thrust in activism will come from. But as an aside, if you ever want a job, like this is a good, there's like Godrej and Mahindra here. And we're always like looking for like great talent, so send us your resumes.
Godrej HR is constantly in touch with me for the last 2 years.
Oh,
I'm
very
pretty
good.
sure I'll be entering Godrej in the next few months.
Sorry. Yeah.
No, I have a totally different point of view. I have been in the government where I have actually rolled out what is called gender budgeting for India. It's a kind of a static growth since 2004. But when I retired, then I was brought back in again to look at it, what can be done. What I find interesting is that events in the country have overtaken what government policies can do. One of which is the demographic changes which we are seeing. We are seeing sizes of families reducing, which means whatever child you have, you inevitably end up loving them. You know, I mean,
No, this is great actually.
so sorry, I'm being blunt, but
No, maybe this is how inclusion will happen. Yeah.
But so the way we saw it in gender, I mean, you're seeing this current last Asian Games, how the girls ran, and they ran for their lives, and they just ran. And they said that, how did you run so much? They said, our fathers made us run, or our fathers made us throw sugar cane in the fields. We're talking rural right now. Because I do believe that urban India definitely has more advantages. So what we are seeing in the gender space, these are purely my conclusions, is that we are moving towards a more inclusive scenario. Nowhere is it more visible, and again, I'm getting into a different realm. But I'm giving you a data now. From 2019, women voters have surpassed male voters. And they've become a very powerful player in that space. So the more you have inclusion of one kind, and women have been denied their space. So the more they are included, the more you'll find that there will be inclusion of other dimensions. Now you've made a very interesting point. The moment the child is born, pretty much you say rewrite happens. So you don't have a sexual identity which is forced on you. It's a kind of an organic choice. So similarly, I mean, you are made a woman because of a certain sexuality. But do you make a choice going beyond the binaries? And that's an inevitability given the way the population is growing. These are purely my thoughts born out of my experience.
No, and they're excellent. And if you see, I mean, there's a great, what you are saying and the way schemes are being rolled out and the way attention is being paid to in the past few years, I mean, it's no coincidence. I mean, a lot of what is being done in the event space also, more than, say, some of the programs, is an understanding of this. So it's spot on. In terms of schemes being launched and used, completely. For example, the last budget had a scheme, I think 35 crores was supposed to be was spent for transgender welfare. And I think 12 lakhs of that has been spent, right?
That's what we saw in the genders.
Yeah.
2004, nothing could be picked up.
Yeah.
Now the amount you give is less.
Yeah. Meanwhile, there are so many Garima Grahs and transgender homes or whatever which are just waiting but not able to get the money that they are due. But our queer people, including our queer activists, and we're smart. We'll figure it out and we'll get some of this which is due to us. As will these governments be allocating more and more based on. So thank you. Thank you. Yeah. If not more, can I ask you all one question? What gives you all hope at this moment? I just shared some of the things that gives me hope. But what makes you feel hopeful about the world at large? Yeah.
I think the fact that some of these kinds of inclusion, although sometimes we feel like they're going in a certain direction, or there's saffronization, etc., but I think that because there are these collective spaces of protest, we will be able to bring in more kinds of inclusion if we push towards one kind without being too cynical about it. So I really like that you focused on it as a future that we are imagining. I would like to see more, intersectional queer conversations happening about Muslims being queer, like myself, but also not just being accepted as queer people, but also as Muslim folks. But I don't feel that it won't happen. I think the more we accept queers, we will also accept other kinds of people. So that's what gives me hope.
Parmesh,
Thank you.
before you answer that, it's linked to this. You'd once had a very stimulating conversation in which you'd raised the point about that the people seeking inclusion are themselves sometimes culpable of some of the most egregious phobias and exclusionary habits, right? So, for instance, just because somebody is gay doesn't make him a particularly inclusive person. And I'd like you to complicate this point about the intersectionality a little, because how do you deal with the saffronized lesbian? How do you deal with the, those kinds of issues? Because they are not all, just all marginalized people cannot have solidarities amongst them purely because they're marginalized.
Yeah. So this is where we are at this moment in queer politics in our country at this point. I don't think we were ever, there are hierarchies, there are some queers who are more equal than others and so on, and there are some rights which some people have fought for more versus others and so on. And certainly we've not had a good history of, say, intra-queer solidarity. For example, when 377 was happening, the petitioners and all, we all expected everyone to come together, including trans people. But when 2019, when the Trans Act happened and it was deeply problematic, very few people from the L, G, B, I, or A groups came to support our trans siblings to protest that and for us. So, there are very visible intra-queer fissures based on all of these aspects. So perhaps queer unity as an ideal has always been that, just an ideal. I think what has helped in the past few years is there have been moments when it is what Gayatri Spivak calls strategic essentialism, where you have to kind of come together because you are for a time-bound specific thing. So I think perhaps there was unity only when there was a time-bound specific thing. So 377, for example, there was a unified because everyone wanted 377 to go for some reason or the other. I don't think there was unity for marriage because I don't think everyone wanted marriage in that sense. That's why if you see the decibel level in the media, or the lack of relative disappointment post the verdict, there wasn't that, everyone wasn't, invested in the same way for that. How do I deal? I'm ridiculously, very, very, with great purposefully optimistic in how I deal with fissures. And I do this all the time. I have friends from all ends of the queer spectrum. And there is now literally a rainbow of, say, beliefs and possibilities within the queer space as well. I try and urge everyone to understand that what unites us is more than what should divide us. Especially as queer people, we have a mountain of challenges beyond queerness to face and overcome. And so just spending so much time and energy on, instead of being loving, caring, pulling intersectional in the way we imagine, ceding our time and space to marginalized voices within the community which are rightfully upset because they have rightfully been historically ignored, is more productive than some of this. I try my best to do that role. Mostly I fail, but I continue to do so with love and 2 pieces of dark chocolate every night.
I think we'll need to wrap up fairly soon, so...
Okay, hi, Prash.
Unless there's some number of questions.
Just one question.
No, yours, of course.
Okay.
If anyone has a question, please think about it now, and we'll take the last question after this.
Hi. Do you think you can use the power of mythology to influence this queer relationship? Like when you talk about Mahabharata, there has been character like Shikhandi. In fact, the relationship of Pandavas with Panchali was a bit queer. Even in Greek mythology, the relationship between Achilles and Patroclus was also considered as queer. So especially when we talk about rural and when we talk about much more believed society that is evolving up? Can you use the power of mythological stories to drive these changes?
Certainly, and one uses whatever one has, and we're lucky that in this space we can build on, say, Salim and Ruth's, powerful research from so many years ago. Others like Devdutt, who gave the lecture last year, have built on that as well. And there have been so many now writers who have used mythology in a very powerful and meaningful way to argue that queerness has always existed. In Queeristan, I draw upon some of this work, but there's also now, and I've cited work from Jain texts or texts from Islamic India, beyond just Hindu mythology, talk about how queerness has been part of the ethos of this region since forever. So in our mythological texts, but also subsequently right until current time, and actually that is what same-sex love in India does as a book. It traces queerness from medieval India all the way to today. So from the Mahabharata to, say, Lihaf, for example, and then even beyond, right? All the way forward then to that as well. So yeah, we use everything we can to help people understand that, we have always been in a state of Queeristan in that sense, yeah. My conclusion to Queeristan is that, as I mentioned towards the end of my talk, that we can see the contours and outlines, which a lot of us have helped draw, building on the work of, say, previous scholars and building on the incredible work of activists and change makers right now. But it is still an outline, and that it is up to us, in fact, it is incumbent on all of us to color it into the vibrant space that it can possibly be, not just for queer people, because Queeristan is an imagination in which everyone flourishes. So, queer, straight, otherwise, and so on. I think it's, when you look at like inclusion, love, all these are win-win scenarios in that sense, right? I mean, when you love, you expand, at least. I mean, I have expanded a little bit this way also, but you know what I mean. So my conclusion to that is that there's no downside in all of us coming together to help imagine this better world, because we are all going to benefit from it. That's my conclusion. So why don't we do it jaldi? No. No, but maybe that's my 2 pieces of very strong dark chocolate every night talking. Wait, this one, there's a last thing.
I wanted to say what gives me hope, and it's local grassroots nonprofits. Like I've come to Lucknow and Humsafar. You start with women handling divorce cases, then you're going to do workshops about gender and sexuality. And my friend Ritu works at Humsafar and is telling me about how many poor, maybe Dalit Muslim girls are talking about wanting to pursue education instead of, shadi. So many things nonprofit activists who care about the community are doing. So that brings me hope.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you, Ritu, for all your amazing work and poetry. Actually, if you don't mind, can we end with a poem? Ritu, not to put you on stage and pressure, but can you end with one of your 2 poems of yesterday? Come forward. Sorry, we should have planned this more, but yeah.
Sorry.
For all those who don't know, Ritu is an incredible poet. We are not sorry at all. Come here. And they recited 2 poems to me yesterday, but I feel like we can hear both.
Sorry. So I usually write for children's book, and one of the poem was my 4-year-old sibling asked me, "आप कैसी दीदी हैं?" तो मैंने उसके लिए ये लिखा था कि तुम ये याद कर लो और तुमसे कभी भी कोई पूछेगा तो ऐसे जवाब दे देना। मेरी दीदी सबसे प्यारी, सब लोगों से है वो न्यारी, चेहरे पर है काली दाढ़ी और कानों में झूले बाली। मेरी दीदी सबसे प्यारी, हर कपड़े में वो जचती है, चाहे शर्ट हो या हो साड़ी। मैं जब भी शैतानी करता, पापा से वो मुझे बचाती। मीठा जब घर पे है बनता, अपना हिस्सा मुझे खिलाती। And while teaching her family क्या होता है, giving examples, I wrote this a very thing. राहुल के हैं पापा 2, एक पापा जब काम है करते, दूजे उसको गोदी लेते। उसे एक हॉकी है सिखाते, एक पापा सिलना सिखलाते, दोनों मिल जब उसे पढ़ाते, बर्तन घर के साथ में धोते, तीनों मिल जब सोने जाते, जोर जोर खर्राटे देते. And lastly, one line for that brings hope is the inner collectivization which we have, grown, cultivated among us. as मैं तवक्को नहीं रखता किसी नवाइश की तुझसे, ज़दा देखी है तेरी आसरी में हमने, पर राख याद कि मौजज़ा लाएगी जाम्बिश मेरी, मेरा वस्ल ही अज़ल है मेरा, होगा फतेह की रेखा जबी में मेरी, जब साथ खड़ा है बज़ में यारा हमारा, जब साथ खड़ा है बज़ में यारा. Thank you.
What a fantastic way to end this session. Thank you for making that happen. Ladies and gentlemen, our very own, our very special, our very colorful Lucknow Lectern 2024. Let's give him an even bigger round of applause. And I'm pretty sure Professor Kidwai is looking down at us a little skeptically, but actually very happily. I'd like everyone to know that Salim Bhai's sister is here with us today, and we're thrilled to have Sufi Appa with us. Thank you very much. Thank you to the most amazing audience. You've made it happen for us time and time again, but today you surpassed all our expectations. And from the team here, we thank you. We thank you all. We have another session in half an hour. If you'd like to join us, Seher Zama, in conversation with Muzaffar Ali Saab and Dr. Mandvi Singh of Bhatkande, and that promises to be quite scintillating. So have a cup of chai. I think after this we all need that. Thank you for all these questions. I think that they really wrapped up the evening beautifully. I think one last word from you.
No, thank you everyone, and continue. As I said earlier, join us all in that beautiful, beautiful rainbow-colored Queeristan, not just in our heads, but let's really co-create it together. And see you again next year at Sanatkada with lots of other friends and family members.
Thank you.